Um, and so that brings me to my first point for our workshop this evening, that we are recording this workshop. And so I just ask that you all keep yourselves muted throughout the presentation, so that our recording is as seamless as possible. And we will be having a question and answer session at the end of the workshop. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put those questions into the chat or hold on to them, and you can raise your hand and use the unmute function to ask those questions when we get to that point of the presentation. But I'll just roll right into our presentation this evening. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Truckee North Tahoe Forest Management Program. And the program itself is funded through CAL FIRE. And so we're going to start off giving a little bit of background on that program. And then we'll get into the applicant eligibility and the types of work that are allowed through the program, the application timeline, and any reporting requirements if you are awarded funding through the program. And then I'll give us a brief guided tour of some of the resources that are available on our website, as well as show you how to actually access the application itself. And some of you, I recognize your names, and so welcome back if you've applied to the program before, or if you are new to the program this year, welcome. We're looking forward to sharing the information with you all and hoping that we can support as many people as possible in this process. So with that, I'll jump into our program overview. And so first, at a higher level, this program is managed by the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation, whose mission is to connect people and opportunities, generating resources to build a more caring, creative, and effective community. And TTCF works in many areas to support our community, including family strengthening and housing. But the initiative at TTCF that makes the Truckee North Tahoe Forest Management Program possible is our Forest Futures program. And so I'm our Forest Futures program coordinator, and my supervisor, Nicole Miller, is on the call this evening as well, who is our Forest Futures program director. And this is an initiative that was launched over 2 years ago and is raising private dollars to grant those funds out to critical wildfire resilience and forest health projects in our region. Forest Futures itself has granted over $2.5 million in private funding to nonprofits and agencies in our region to do critical work in these 3 impact areas that you see here. So we have protect communities, build the forest economy, and accelerate market solutions. However, in addition to that, private philanthropy, in June 2022, TTCF was awarded a $1.9 million block grant through CAL FIRE's Wildfire Resilience Block Grant Program. The Wildfire Resilience Block Grant Program is actually a pilot program through CAL FIRE. And CAL FIRE is really trying to pilot many new ways to accelerate the rate at which wildfire resilience projects are implemented statewide. And a block grant is a very exciting thing. This funding allows us to establish a totally new program and support more projects than CAL FIRE has the direct capacity to manage. So you all may hear me call this program the CAL FIRE program, but really the program that this is allowing us to stand up is this Truckee North Tahoe Forest Management Program, or the TNT FMP. And what that program is ultimately is a funding opportunity or grant opportunity for both technical assistance or for implementation funding for wildfire resilience projects. And there's a lot of funding available for these types of projects to take place on federal and state land, but there's really a gap for private landowners, such as many of yourselves. And so that's what this program is specifically targeting, private landowners. And that can look like a lot of different things. Those can be individuals, those can be HOAs, those can be ski resorts. You know, in our region, that takes a very wide definition, but this is specifically for private landowners. And I'll end this slide with noting that because this is a pilot program, there are a lot of unknowns and testing ideas to see if they work. And so for any of you who are joining us again from having applied to the program last year, or maybe current grantees, there are some changes based on the things that we learned in the first year of the program that we're going to talk through this evening, or that you may run into in the upcoming application. But that's just all to say that we're really excited about this learning process and making this program as effective and efficient for private landowners in our region. Before getting too far into the program details, I want to give a huge shout out to our steering committee members. I'm not sure if any of them are on the call tonight. Let me look and see quickly. I don't think so, but they've been incredibly instrumental in the development of this program, and I can't thank them enough. The folks on this slide have volunteered time to help build out this program and contributed their expertise to making this program be effective in giving out dollars. So I am incredibly grateful to them, and these folks also are some of these folks make up our application review committee. So that's also of note, just in that they're volunteering a lot of time to help this program be successful. So the Truckee North Tahoe Forest Management Program, as I've already mentioned, there are multiple avenues through the program to support landowners with funding. And those funding pathways are either to receive technical assistance, to either plan a project, or to develop a forest management plan for your property. You can receive technical assistance to go through the CEQA or California Environmental Quality Act environmental compliance process, or you can apply to receive funding to implement a project if you already have CEQA environmental compliance in place. And we're going to go deeper into those options in a moment, but I want to just bring up this table to show you all the amount of funding that we have available for technical assistance and for implementation. What technical assistance means is that it's covering the costs of a registered professional forester, or you may hear someone say RPF, to actually conduct the technical assistance work. So to help you develop a project or to help you through the many tricky elements of environmental compliance. Whereas implementation funding covers the costs of a contractor to actually implement a project on the ground. And so at the start of the program, we had just over $1.7 million in funding available through the program across both of these budget categories. And in 2023, we awarded just a little over $500,000 to 7 different projects. And so you can see here in the bottom row of our table, the amount of funding that we have remaining to allocate either in this 2024 application round or 2025. Our grant agreement with CAL FIRE goes through the end of March 2026. So at this point in time, unless we pursue a grant agreement extension with CAL FIRE, we'd be looking to have all projects that are awarded funding through this program to spend dollars by the end of 2025, so by December 2025. So just to keep that in mind when you're thinking about project timelines. And given what we saw in the first application round, we know that there is a greater need for this type of funding than there is funding available. $1.7 million is a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of forest health projects and wildfire resilience projects, that can only go so far. And so though you may not receive funding or be awarded funding or support through this actual program, though we want to support as many landowners as possible, it is also helpful information to TTCF as an organization that raises a wide range of different types of money, private money. This is uniquely one of the only public funding sources that TTCF manages. But knowing the true need of our community allows us to actually go out to donors and talk with them and say, hey, we need more money in our region to support projects like this. So even though if you're not awarded funding, I know that's upsetting, but we're hopeful that that ultimately has a greater cause of being able to bring more dollars into our community. Going more specifically into the eligibility requirements, if you are to apply to this program, CAL FIRE has fairly strict criteria of who this block grant can serve. And so that's private landowners. You have to own non-industrial land. So industrial land in California, that land would be zoned as a timber production zone or a TPZ. And so no industrial land qualifies. And more specifically, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, commercial projects are not supported through this, or any commercial revenue through this program has to be reinvested in the project itself. Because this is funded through taxpayer dollars, CAL FIRE cannot allow projects to generate revenue or income for grantees. And then another element of eligibility is that the total land ownership must be greater than 3 acres, but fewer than 5,000 acres. And I will note on that, if multiple ownership projects are allowed through the program, but all of the landowners must independently meet the eligibility requirements. So 3 landowners that all own 1 acre could not combine to meet the 3-acre minimum. However, 3 landowners that own 3 acres each could combine. So if you have specific questions about that element, if you're pursuing a multi-ownership project, I encourage you to reach out if that's confusing at all. The last point of eligibility is that the majority of the project must fall within the program boundary, which you can see, it's hard to tell exactly with this map here on the slide, exactly the boundary, but it's roughly the Tahoe Truckee Unified School District, but slightly larger. But we have a step in the application process that actually allows us to verify that you fall within the program boundary before you begin the full application. Then moving into types of work that are allowed to be completed through the program. This is a long list, which I'm not going to read off to you, but just to note and say there are types of work and types of work that are allowed to be funded through the program and types of work that are not allowed to be funded. So as I've noted, technical assistance for project development, forest management plan development, support to go through the CEQA environmental compliance process, and then a number of different forest health treatments and wildfire resilience treatments qualify to be funded through this program. On the other end, there's a number of things that aren't allowed to be funded through the program. And there's a couple here that I just want to highlight because I feel like these can be more non-starters for applicants in the experience of talking with folks in the last year. So first and foremost, want to note that funding cannot be used to develop a commercial timber harvest plan. A THP is the acronym for Timber Harvest Plan. Those actually do qualify as CEQA environmental compliance documents. And if your property already has one in place, you are able to use that to meet CEQA compliance. However, you cannot use funding through this program to develop a new THP. So I just want to note that. Additionally, prescribed fire is not allowed to be funded, but burning of piles for the purposes of slash disposal is. So just also noting the nuance there with fire on projects. And then additionally, highlighting these last two points in this list, any project that is environmental mitigation to offset another project is not allowed. So for example, if you own land where a development is proposed and you've done an environmental analysis that says you must treat the forest prior to the development being allowed to be constructed, these grant funds could not be used to complete the forest health work in that circumstance because it's a mitigation. And then the last major thing to point out is kind of what I was saying around the commercial project element. Really, any funds through the sale of firewood or any sort of lumber sales would have to be, the dollars made from that would have to be reinvested into the project. And so I know a lot of property owners own land and want to generate revenue from that, but due to the requirements of this being a publicly funded program, that is why that revenue would have to be reinvested into the project. So now moving into the different application pathways that we've discussed a little bit so far. We've made this flow chart to try to help folks more easily discern what they are able to apply for based on where they're at in the planning process. So you can see here we have things slightly color coded, so I'll reference the colors to help direct us. So if you do not have a defined project plan, you would be able to apply for one of the 2 teal options at the bottom of the chart. That's to either develop a forest management plan for your property using the California Cooperative Forest Management Plan template, which within that forest management plan document, you and a forester create forest management goals as well as very specific project outcomes and criteria for your property. Or you could develop without a management plan, just a very thorough project plan and design. If you already have a defined project plan that's either been identified in a forest management plan or that's been drawn up by a forester with specific treatment types and zones, you can then apply for CEQA environmental compliance technical assistance. And I want to note, because this CEQA element has been new to a lot of private landowners, this environmental compliance is required for any project receiving funding through this program because we are using a public funding source. And so CEQA is triggered whenever you are operating on public lands, if projects are implemented on public lands or state lands of that nature, or if what's paying for the project work to be done is public funding. And so that is why this program requires that environmental compliance process. And so we support folks to go through that environmental compliance process and then also have to have CAL FIRE actually verify that environmental compliance has been met prior to any implementation of the project beginning. So to complete CEQA through this program, landowners must have something called a lead agency backing their project. A lead agency is a public agency such as your local fire district or the county that will take responsibility for your project in the eyes of the state office of planning and research. And they're the folks that actually review and manage all environmental compliance at the state level. So if you're applying for CEQA through this program, you'll need to actually be in contact with a potential lead agency and have a letter of support included in your application indicating that they'll support you in this process. And depending on the lead agency, they may have the capacity to completely file your environmental compliance paperwork, or you may need additional support from a registered professional forester to actually prepare some of the necessary information for filing. And CEQA, which I am definitely not a CEQA expert, but I highly encourage you to reach out to me and I can connect you with folks if you need greater assistance in this process. But CEQA will take different lengths of time depending on the complexity of your project. And so whether you qualify for an exemption or not, those different variables do impact the length of time that CEQA process will take and can impact the implementation timeline of a project as well. If you already have CEQA environmental compliance met, that's where you can apply directly for implementation funding, which is that kind of sky blue option at the top of the flow chart. And you will need to provide your CEQA document with your application. And the application review committee, if they're interested in funding your project, would then need CAL FIRE to review and approve that CEQA document prior to finalizing a grant award. I will note that new this year, we are allowing applicants to apply for both CEQA and implementation at the same time, so that upper of the two green options allows you to pursue both CEQA and implementation at the same time. And if you're doing this, you'll still need to have the lead agency, letter of support for your project. And then you'll additionally be asked to include a timeline for which you intend to complete CEQA and a timeline in which you would intend to implement the project if awarded funding. And so this approach is taking kind of a phase 1 and phase 2 look at your project, where phase 1 would be the environmental compliance process. And then phase 2 of the implementation of the project would look at starting only if successful completion of that phase 1 environmental compliance is met. But we're looking at doing this to try to streamline the process and so that folks don't have to apply multiple times to the program based on what we've learned in this last year. The last thing I'll note here is that if you're applying to develop a forest management plan or a project for your property, you are not eligible to apply for CEQA or implementation in the same route. The CEQA, the environmental compliance process, is very project specific, and those planning elements or planning technical assistance is very much geared at helping you develop a project that prepares you to then move into CEQA. But if you don't have that project plan in place already, you wouldn't actually have the needed elements to go through the CEQA process. So now looking at the application timeline, as you all may have seen in on the website or in an email that you received from me, depending upon how you learned about the program, the application is open now. After the workshop, you are welcome to go on the website and begin the application process, and it will remain open through February 18th, which is a Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So that's 5.5 to 6 weeks that the application will be open. And at that point in time, the review process will start. Only applications that are fully complete and have all the necessary requirements will be packaged and moved to review by our application review committee. So it's really imperative that you look at the required questions in the application, you look at the evaluation rubric, which we'll talk about here in just a minute, and complete all the required pieces that will allow your application to actually move on to the next round. The application online is set up so that you can't submit without including a lot of that information. But also ensuring that it's thorough and complete will be essential. The review process does take some time. And so for the majority of the month of March, our review committee will be reviewing applications and will meet to make a recommendation. And then in early April, that recommendation will go to TTCF's board for approval. And at that point in time, we'll notify all applicants about funding decisions, whether you were awarded funding or not, and begin the contracting process with folks. So this timeline, if you all were familiar with the program last year, is a little bit earlier in the year. We started the application in March of 2023. And one of our lessons learned in the last round of the application is that foresters and contractors' time is very precious and it's hard to get in their schedule. And so we're looking at moving up this timeline so that folks can actually work with foresters and contractors and be sure that they're on their schedule for the field season, and be able to actually get the work done that they're awarded funding for. And then throughout the summer and fall, and pretty much until it snows, we hope that project work will be able to take place. So as I mentioned just a second ago, the full application or evaluation rubric rather is available on the website, and I encourage you to review it in advance of starting the application process. I also encourage you to review the program goals document that's also available on the website, as that lays out the priorities of the program that the steering committee has identified in terms of which proposed scopes of work or projects most strongly align with the wildfire resilience goals of this particular program. And so I'll give a high level overview here of the 4 different sections in which folks are scored. We have every applicant will complete applicant information, general property information, and the project financial information and administrative capacity. And then in the 3rd section, based on what you are seeking funding for, you'll have kind of a conditional application that will pop up and a specific set of questions, whether you're planning a project, whether you're going through environmental compliance, or whether you're looking to implement a project. The applicant information is very general, and so it doesn't have any points awarded to it. The general property information includes questions such as what is the current state of your property, meaning what does the fuel loading look like? Why is this a fire concern? How the property aligns to regional wildfire resilience efforts, and then some of what your project goals are. The 3rd section, as I mentioned, varies depending upon what you're seeking funding for. And then that financial information section asks you to include a budget narrative, supporting documentation to justify your request to ask, and to indicate that you have the capacity to manage grant funds or meet the reporting requirements of the program. There is a budget template that we've linked within the application for you to use. So we ask that you use that just so it's streamlined and uniform across all applicants. And in addition, in this section, you'll be asked to actually indicate any matching funds or in-kind match that you're able to bring to the project or scope of work. Or if you're not able to bring match to the table, a compelling statement of financial need. Something that's a high priority of our steering committee is that we are able to fund projects that wouldn't be able to be completed without a program such as this one. However, we also want to acknowledge that matching dollars can allow these grant funds to go significantly further and treat a lot more acres. And so we are weighing these matching dollars against compelling financial needs. So if you have a financial need, please don't be deterred from applying to the program. That is something that our committee and evaluation process values and is looking to support. But you will have to be able to back that information in that financial information section. I'll additionally add and encourage you in the evaluation rubric, this particular section, to look at how many points are awarded based on how much match is brought to the table, because you are awarded more points for bringing more match to the table if you don't have that compelling financial need. So then just to make folks aware, I know this is down the line and doesn't necessarily correlate directly to the application process, but we do want everyone to know that if you are awarded funding through the program, there are grant reporting requirements that all applicants will give to TTCF. And ultimately, we are reporting in those expenditures back to CAL FIRE. And so the questions that we ask here, we've tried to keep them as minimal as possible to allow us to gather the information that we need to be able to deliver back to CAL FIRE. And so hopefully it's not incredibly burdensome, but we do want everyone to just be aware that there are reporting requirements. So if that deters anyone from wanting to apply to the program in the first place, that you can be aware of that from the get-go. So those reports are given quarterly, and they require a progress narrative, any challenges that are faced throughout the program or throughout the work, what upcoming work will take place, and then any grant expenses that have been incurred and necessary supporting documentation so that we can actually trigger the reimbursement process for folks. So before I transition to looking at our website and showing folks actually how to apply to the program, I just want to reiterate here that the application is open now and will remain open through February 18th. The website is full of a lot of resources, and so we're going to navigate to that now as a group so that everyone can see what is available and what you most essentially need to navigate to. And then, as I've said in the past, if you have any questions or if any challenges come up, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to meet with all applicants, any applicants individually, to talk through project ideas or any questions that you have with the application process, just to be able to ensure that applicants feel supported and they feel like they understand what they're actually submitting at the time that they submit. So I highly encourage you to reach out if you have any questions at all, or if you just want to talk through the process. So with that, I'm going to transition to looking at the website. And I just wanted to give a moment to Nicole, if you had anything that you wanted to add that I missed in the slide deck.
I don't. Thanks, Ann. Go ahead.
Cool. All right, so looking at the website here, this link will send out in a follow-up email as well to all of the folks that are here or have registered for the workshop. But the Truckee North Tahoe Forest Management Program page has just a very brief description of the program, and then a section for upcoming events. So this event, or back in November, we hosted a private property forest management workshop for folks. So you can tune in here if there are any events that might pique your interest. The main section that you'll interact with is this program resources section. There's a number of documents here, as you can see, but the main ones that I've highlighted to you thus far are the program goals document. That's the document that actually goes through kind of the metrics that our steering committee has hit, as well as some of our deliverables to CAL FIRE, and just defines a little bit more in depth what the program is looking to achieve in this particular funding round. And then we also have a little bit further down the program evaluation rubric. As I noted, the whole application is laid out in that rubric, and you can see which questions are scored and which questions are not scored, and how many points are assigned to each question when you are actually completing the application, so that you are best informed when completing the application. The other document that I haven't mentioned yet, there's a frequently asked questions document that we update periodically in here based on questions that we're receiving from folks. And so I do encourage you to go through that FAQ document to actually track and see what information is coming up. And if you have any particular questions about the program, as I said, please reach out to me, but that FAQ doc can also be a great resource. So the last document that I'll highlight, and we're going to go look at together, is this how to apply document. And now that the application is open, we're actually going to move that up in the program resources. But that document, when we link, if we click on it, is a PDF that shows you how to access the applicant portal. We are having folks apply online. So if you have any issues or technical needs that you aren't able to apply online, please reach out and we'll find a solution. But we do ask that if applicants are able to use this online portal, that they do so. So this PDF here actually walks you through and has links to the online resources that TTCF uses. And this is also the same platform through which you would do any sort of reporting at the back end if awarded funding. So the first step, as we've talked about, is before starting the application process to actually review all of the resources that are available on the website. Once you've done that, great and excellent that you all are here this evening watching this presentation, because that also sets you up for great success to start the application process. First, you'll need to create a user account. So within this document, you can directly click the link and it'll open a new tab, and you'll click open link. And once it loads, we can see here together, this is what the main page looks like. Whether you already have an account, you can use the same login credentials, or you may need to create a new account and go through that process. So I'll navigate back to our how to apply document just so that we can track here together. Once you click on that create new account, you'll be prompted to input some required information. And depending upon whether you're applying on behalf of an organization or if you're a private landowner that's an individual, some of the questions may seem a little weird. So we do just note that with organization name, if you're an individual, just to put your first and last name into that box. Everything else should be relatively straightforward. If you don't want to include an EIN or a tax identification number or social security number here, please don't. If that is not what you would like to do, please just put a bunch of zeros in there. That will come into play if you're awarded funding. We will ask for a W-9 to be able to distribute funds. However, through the application process, you're not evaluated on that. So if you'd prefer to include that information at a later point in time, we totally understand that and can work with that. Once you've created an account, you'll be brought to kind of a really basic dashboard. And in the upper left-hand corner of the page, you'll see these two icons. You'll see a house and then a little apply button. So step 4 is to actually click on that apply button. And this is TTCF's grants management portal for all of our grant cycles. The only grant opportunity that's available right now is the Truckee North Tahoe Forest Management Program. But if other grant cycles do open, or if you see others available, just make sure that you're applying to the 2024 Truckee North Tahoe Forest Management Program. And then to start the application process, you'll click on this far right and actually click apply. Once you click apply, you'll be brought into this first stage of the application, which we're calling this letter of intent, or that's what the software calls it. And this letter of intent process is a brief few questions about whether you meet the eligibility requirements. So before gaining access to the full application, you'll be prompted by being asked if you own private land that's non-industrial, that's forested land. And then you'll also be asked to include your assessor's parcel number or your APN. And the question on the LOI prompts you, if you don't have that information handy, you can actually navigate to the county websites where you can look up that information about your property. And by inputting that information and submitting your LOI, you are then saying, I would like to apply to the program. I will get a notification on my end that you have submitted this LOI, and I'll go into the system on our back end and verify that you meet the eligibility requirements and then move your application forward. As I noted earlier, we want to make sure that folks aren't getting into the application if they don't actually meet the eligibility requirements, because we know it takes time and energy to complete an application. And so we want to verify that folks do meet all the eligibility requirements before they go through the process. I will also note that I work Monday to Friday. And so if you're working on this application on the weekend, or if I'm at all slammed with a lot of applications coming in or LOIs coming in, please just give a slight grace period. I am auto notified when the LOIs are submitted. and so I'll try to do it as quickly as possible, but it is not an immediate process because we are manually verifying that everyone meets the eligibility requirements. But I will note, if you do want to start looking at the application questions rather, there is a PDF of all the application questions under that program resources section on the TNT FMP website. So if you want to start looking at the questions and thinking about them before you have access to the full application, that's an option as well. Once I have pushed your LOI through on the back end, once you log back into the portal, you'll then see again the option when you click on the home icon this time. You'll see that you have an LOI that's been submitted, and then you have a draft of your application. And it's by clicking this edit application button that you can then access the full application and all of the questions. And then once you go through the full application process, you'll click submit. And again, I'll be prompted to then go and begin the kind of review and compilation process. But it is at that February 18th deadline that we'll package everything and prepare our application review committee to actually begin the review process. So even if you get your application in well in advance, our review process with our committee won't start until after that February 18th deadline. So going back to the timeline, we're gonna begin the review process, and then we'll have our review committee and recommendation for approval by the TTCF board in early April. So there is some time that is needed for the actual review process. Those were the things that I wanted to take the time to highlight. As I said, I'll just reiterate again, the program resources. There's a lot of information in there. It can feel dense, so if you have specific questions, please reach out to me. I'll be sure to put my email in the chat. But I see that there are things coming through in the chat as well, and so I will stop the presentation there and allow us to move into our Q&A portion. And I'll see if Nicole she's been monitoring the chat, so if she has any things.
Yeah, there were a couple questions. I think you touched on this one, but just to reiterate it, the question was, will all projects require CEQA qualification?
Yes. Any projects that are looking to have implementation funding through this program, or if you're seeking implementation funding through another CAL FIRE program or another grant program, such as the Measure T Community Grant Cycle, all of those publicly funded grant opportunities require CEQA environmental compliance. So yes, all projects that are seeking implementation funding are required to complete CEQA.
The next one. If I'm requesting funding for a forest management plan, there would be no CEQA components required, as in no exemptions, because it is not a specific plan. So can you talk about, I think, just the distinction between if you're applying for technical assistance versus CEQA implementation?
Yeah, absolutely. So the forest management plan, and linked on the program resources, there is a copy of that forest management plan template. And so you can see what all information goes into the development of a forest management plan. And really what that helps property owners define are a lot of what resources exist on your property. So it's a major inventory of what's on your property, where there are vegetation or fuel loading concerns, and what the priority treatment areas would be, as well as helping you as a property owner actually define kind of your long-term management goals. Maybe you're managing for wildfire mitigation, maybe you're managing for your future grandchildren to be able to come back to this property and see it in the same way that you have loved the land. And so that forest management plan is really a broad document that helps you define what are your goals, but also helps to define some of the very specific project treatments that could take place on your land to help you meet whatever goals you're looking to set. So on the contrary, the CEQA environmental compliance is kind of that next step. Once you have that project plan in place, you're able to actually take that project plan and that definitive information and work with a registered professional forester and a lead agency to go through the environmental compliance process to either get an exemption in place, or depending on the complexity of your project, you might be seeking a full environmental impact report. But that CEQA component can only really be initiated when you have those project specific details in place. So the development of a forest management plan is really that first step. But additionally, that forest management plan is really, in the eyes of this program, helping you to define those project elements and those project specific elements that are needed to be able to go through the CEQA process. Does that help answer that question, or is there additional clarity that is needed? If whoever asked that is welcome to unmute themselves if.
Yeah, that answered my question. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Let's see. There was a question about the match and if there is an expected percentage or an expected amount. So maybe you can speak to kind of how the scoring rubric, I think, plays into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that scored section of match and financial need, if you have financial need and are able to share that you would not be able to implement this project without funding through this program, you are able to win or be awarded full points based on that statement of need. If you are bringing matching dollars to the table or in-kind match to the table, an in-kind match can be volunteer time. If you have the ability to do some of the work yourself, perhaps you are a contractor that's also a property owner. There are different circumstances for different folks that are applying to the program. But in the evaluation rubric, it shows how many points are awarded based on the total dollar amount that the project is. So if you bring between 0 and 4%, you're awarded 1 point in that category. If you bring between 5 and 9%, you're awarded 2 points. And so it's in that match versus financial need section of the evaluation rubric, you can be awarded up to 5 points. And so when that compares to the total scoring of the rubric, that's up to 90 points. That is not going to be the sole decision maker of whether an application is awarded funding or not. And also the scores with the scoring rubric, that's a starting point for our committee to have discussion. But projects are not going to be awarded solely based on the highest scoring applications to the lowest scoring applications. There will be additional conversation and variables factored in based on the committee's expertise. And so those scoring elements do factor into what projects would be most highly considered. However, that's not the sole thing that the committee will be evaluating on. And so if there are other elements or layers or alignment to something that I haven't touched on yet is the alignment to regional priorities. And so there are documents that are included in that program goals document that highlight what priority areas need to be treated. And so if you all are familiar with community wildfire protection plans, the CAL FIRE has a fire hazard severity zone map, all of these different documents that we've included in that program goals document on the website. We're also going to be factoring in how projects align to regional priorities. And so there's more, I'm just rambling at this point, but that's all to say there's more than just this match scoring point. But you can see in the evaluation rubric exactly what percentage of the total project cost you would be awarded points based on match. But I don't want folks to feel like that is the sole thing going into their application review.
Thanks, Anne. There was a question about whether you can start your application in the online system and then leave it in progress, like a draft mode, or do you have to complete it all at once?
You do not have to complete it all at once. The grant software saves all progress. And so there is not a save draft button even. As long as your Wi-Fi is connected and you're online working, it'll save all of your progress. So you can come back and continue to input information at any point in time. And then once you feel that your application is complete, at that point in time, you can click submit, and that's when we are notified that your application has been completed to your satisfaction, and we should begin that review process.
And also, I think you maybe noted this, but a PDF of the application questions is available on the website, right, for people to look at. And you can, I think you can also download it from the online portal. You can download the question list if you want to be able to prepare your answers ahead of time.
Yep, that's correct.
There was another question about how to include multiple APNs for your parcel number, specifically 60 different APNs, but I think in general, what should you do if there's multiple APNs?
Yes, so for the purposes of the LOI, we ask that you include one APN just to indicate, and that's being used to actually verify that your property is within the program boundary. In the application, this is actually an addition from the application last year. There's a section where you would include all APNs if it's a multiple parcel or multiple ownership project. And in that question, you're also asked to include a name and contact email for any other owners if there are multiple owners in that project that you're proposing. So if the APN that you are looking at submitting in your LOI is less than 3 acres, that's okay, because we're looking in the LOI by you certifying that the project or the total ownership is between 3,000 and 5,000 acres. The APN that you submit does not have to meet that 3-acre requirement. I would say the majority of folks it will, but if there are specific circumstances where you're worried about how that's perceived, just let us know. But yes, there is an opportunity to include however many APNs are involved in the project.
And there was only one more question in the chat, and I think we can answer part of it, but approximately how much time and money go into preparing a forest management plan? I think we can answer the money part. I'm not sure about the time part.
Yeah, so in some of the quotes that we received from foresters in the last application round, really the forest management plan development is pretty standard from what we've heard from foresters. And they estimated kind of 80 hours to 100 hours to complete that forest management plan, regardless of the size of the property. And a lot of that goes into the forest management plan. A lot of it is conversations between the forester and the property owner to discuss what their management goals are. And then the forester comes out and actually does survey the land and develop maps. And so that process can create some of that time variability, but the actual assembling of the management plan, we've heard is pretty standard in that 80 to 100 hour range. But I would say that can be subject to change, and also depending upon the forester and their specific rates. We've seen great variability in what people have put forth in that. So if you're looking at the forest management plan option, we, in that section 3 of the application, you're actually asked to be in contact with a forester to begin that conversation. And so if you have questions about getting in touch with a forester, we encourage you to reach out in that management plan development process.
A couple more questions came in. So if you have multiple APNs, would you apply as a private owner or an HOA? I can answer that one if you want.
Yeah.
You would only apply as an HOA if you are actually like a registered HOA with the state of California. So even if there's multiple APNs in the project, like let's say, for example, you and 3 of your neighbors want to apply collectively, one of you would be submitting the application. There's a question about who the project lead is. So there still would need to be like one point of contact, one person that submits the application, and that would be the individual that would apply. You only apply as an HOA if you are, an actual HOA submitting on behalf of your HOA members. And then there's a question, do you have people who you recommend for preparing a forest management plan?
So within the application, there's a link. CAL FIRE has a database of all of the registered professional foresters across the state and the areas within which they have indicated that they are willing to do work. And so that database is linked in the application itself. And I can also share that as a resource in the chat before we sign off tonight.
And then another question just came in. Can properties that have mixed zoning, residential forest and timber harvest apply? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say all of the property must, or a portion of the property could apply if they have mixed zoning, but it must be the only part of the land that qualifies is private non-industrial land. So if something is zoned for timber harvest or for that timber production zone, that would need to be excluded from any project work taking place on this property or on the hypothetical property.
I would add too that if there was an applicant in that scenario, that we might even want to verify that with CAL FIRE. So Jason, if you have a property owner in that scenario, I would say reach out to Ann and I with more specific information so that we can just double check with CAL FIRE. That's all the questions I think I managed in the chat. But if anyone else wants to unmute or ask anything else, or if I happen to miss anything in the chat, feel free to speak up before we wrap up. All right, I think we're done with questions then.
Amazing. I'm putting in the chat the RPF database, and then I'll also put in the website link and my email. So if anyone has any follow-up questions to this workshop, or questions that arise throughout the application process as you all start to dig into it, please reach out. As I said, I'm happy to schedule meetings with folks. TTCF's office is in Truckee on Donner Pass Road, kind of near the hospital. I'm happy to meet in person or virtually. I am based in Kings Beach, so if any of you are in the basin, I'm also happy to meet lakeside. So please, as I said, don't hesitate to reach out. We really want folks to feel supported through the process. As we know, it can be a lot of new information for private landowners that don't have to go through some of the environmental compliance or different processes, or may not have engaged with or managed grants in the past. So we really appreciate you all taking the time to join us this evening and learn more about the program, and look forward to seeing your LOIs come through.
Thank you, Ann.
Thanks all.